You know, for some of history's most powerful rulers, their final moments are actually just as revealing as their entire time in power. It's that last chapter where the whole facade of being untouchable just crumbles, often in the most unbelievable ways. So, what can these last moments really teach us about absolute power itself?
I mean, that's the big question, right? When you have total control over everything and everyone, what does your own ending actually look like? Well, as we're about to see, there's no single path, but the patterns that emerge are, frankly, fascinating and usually pretty brutal.
For a lot of these figures, the end comes hard and fast, and it doesn't happen in a fancy palace. It happens at the hands of the very people they used to rule. You could call it justice delivered by the masses, and let me tell you, it is rarely gentle.
What's just staggering here is the speed of it all. Nicolae and Elena Ceausescu ruled Romania with an iron fist for decades, and yet in just 3 days, they went from fleeing their palace to facing a firing squad on Christmas Day. Their entire world just evaporated. An absolutely stunning collapse.
And get this, their end wasn't some quiet execution. Oh no, it was a televised event. The new government had to show the world, and more importantly, show the Romanian people that the Ceausescu era was over. Done. No doubt about it.
This quote, it just perfectly captures that raw, bottled-up fury aimed at Italy's Benito Mussolini. After he was caught and executed, his body wasn't just hidden away. It was brought to a public square in Milan, and the reaction from the crowd was immediate, and it was visceral.
And here is where it gets really grim and symbolic. That location, it was no accident. It was a place where his fascist regime had committed its own atrocities, and now it was being turned back on him. Hanging his body there was this powerful, public act of revenge. It was meant to completely destroy the cult of personality he had built.
And what's really telling is how they're caught. Libya's Muammar Gaddafi, after 42 years of absolute power, was found hiding in a drainage pipe. A drainage pipe. Meanwhile, in the Dominican Republic, the feared Rafael Trujillo was ambushed on a highway by his own guys. In both cases, the all-powerful strongman ends up on the run, hunted down.
And of course, in our modern world, these last moments become global spectacles. That grainy cell phone video of Saddam Hussein being taunted on the gallows, or the chaotic footage of Gaddafi's last minutes. Technology turned these events into raw, unfiltered, and pretty controversial public moments. But, you know, not every dictator is brought down by their enemies. Sometimes, the real threat is the one they built themselves.
Right, so sometimes the end doesn't come from an angry mob or a rival army. It comes from the very system of terror and paranoia that the dictator created. It's like they become the final victim of their own twisted machine. As the Soviet army was literally closing in on Berlin, Adolf Hitler's end was this bizarrely methodical, almost bureaucratic process deep inside a concrete bunker. The man who orchestrated mass murder on a continental scale just chose to check out, to escape judgment, leaving nothing behind but ashes as his empire crumbled right above his head. So, to really understand the death of Joseph Stalin, you have to get this concept, the climate of fear. He ruled the Soviet Union with such absolute terror that a single wrong word or even just a look someone didn't like could get you killed. Nobody was safe, not even the people closest to him.
This story is just wild. After having a massive stroke, Stalin was completely helpless on the floor. But his guards, the people he had trained to fear him more than anything else in the world, were too terrified to go in and check on him without being told to. The man who held life and death in his hands was left to die because his own staff was paralyzed by the very fear he'd perfected.
It's a chilling question, isn't it? If his guards had gone in sooner, could he have been saved? We'll never know for sure. But it sure looks like Stalin became the final casualty of the oppressive system he so carefully built.
Okay, but what about the ones who don't get taken out by a mob or consumed by their own machine? For some, the end is quiet. It's anticlimactic. And for their victims, it's deeply, deeply unsatisfying. They just get away with it? This is maybe the most frustrating ending of all. For men like Pinochet, Pol Pot, and Kim Jong-il, guys responsible for the deaths and suffering of millions, the end didn't come from a bullet or a noose. It came from something much more ordinary, natural causes, often at a ripe old age.
91. Just let that number sink in. That's how old Augusto Pinochet of Chile was when he died. After overseeing a regime of torture, murder, and disappearances, he lived a long life and died of a heart attack in a military hospital, surrounded by his family. And that's the part that's so hard to stomach for his victims. For years, he just played the system, using legal tricks and claiming he was too sick to stand trial to avoid any real accountability. He died before a final verdict was ever reached.
I mean, the timing here is just unbelievable. Pol Pot, the man behind the killing fields that took up to 2 million lives, died of a reported heart failure just as it looked like he was finally about to face an international court. He slipped through justice's fingers at the last possible second. So, we've looked at all these different fates. What's the big takeaway here? What does the final chapter of a dictator's life really tell us about them and about power?
So when you boil it down, you basically see three main endings. There's the violent reckoning, where power is just ripped away from them. Then there's being consumed by the very machine of fear you built. And maybe the most maddening one, the quiet escape, where dying of old age is the ultimate way to dodge justice.
So whether it's a crazy scene caught on a shaky cell phone, a quiet suicide in a bunker, or a peaceful death in a hospital bed, the end of a dictator is always a huge historical moment. It strips away the myth of their power and gives us one last, brutal piece of commentary on their life and their legacy.
And that kind of leaves us with this final thought. When a tyrant dies, especially one who manages to escape a real trial, does that actually count as justice for their victims? Or is it just the closing of a really dark chapter, leaving that question of true accountability hanging in the air forever?